Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here, as always, to sift through the sources, cut through the noise, and really get to the heart of the topics that matter. Today, we're diving deep into something you see everywhere now: consumer boycotts.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, buying things isn't just about buying things anymore. Our sources show it's become, well, almost a political act. People using their wallets to make a statement.
Or withholding their wallets, yeah. It's about signaling what you care about: environment, labor, social issues, you name it.
Right. Boycotts seem everywhere.
Yeah.
But the big question, the one we really want to tackle today is, do they actually work? Are they effective?
That's the core mission for this deep dive. We're looking at whether boycotts are a truly powerful tool, maybe even a substitute when governments aren't acting, or...
Or are they fundamentally flawed?
Exactly. Do structural problems make success just really unlikely most of the time? We've got some fascinating sources: economic theory, legal history, even recent corporate data, and honestly, they don't all agree.
Sounds like a proper deep dive then. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with the pure economics of it. What the theory says about economic consumer boycotts.
Right. These are the ones aimed directly at a company's behavior, trying to pressure them, say, on pollution or maybe their tech choices, when there's no law forcing their hand yet.
So the activists step in where the government hasn't.
In theory. But if you just look at the raw economic models, well, most boycotts probably shouldn't succeed.
Why not? What's the big obstacle?
It really comes down to one major thing: free riding.
Ah, okay. The classic collective action problem. Everyone wants the good outcome, but hopes someone else pays the price.
Precisely. Because joining a boycott isn't free for the individual, it costs you something.
How so?
Well, you usually have to give up the product or service you actually prefer, right? The one that gives you the most utility, as economists say. You switch to something else, maybe something less convenient or lower quality.
So there's a definite immediate cost or sacrifice involved. Yes. And the benefit. That's uncertain. The boycott might fail. And here's the kicker: your personal decision to join or not, it has almost zero impact on whether the whole thing succeeds or fails.
So if it succeeds, you get the benefit anyway, even if you didn't participate and didn't make the sacrifice.
Exactly. So the rational choice for any single person is to let others do the hard work, bear the cost, and you just hope it works out. You free ride.
That makes sense, unfortunately. But what about the people who buy a lot of a company's product? Surely their participation matters more.
You'd think so, but that's where the paradox bites even harder. It's all about opportunity cost.
Okay.
The consumers who could hurt the company the most, the ones buying large quantities, they're usually the ones who lose the most utility by switching.
Because they really like that specific product or rely on it heavily.
Right. For them, boycotting feels like a bigger sacrifice, a higher personal cost. So the economic models predict they're actually less likely to participate for a long time.
Wow. So the people with the most leverage have the least incentive to use it, economically speaking.
That's the tough reality. It often turns the whole thing into what's called a war of attrition. It becomes less about getting everyone involved and more about which side can hold out longer. Can the core group of boycotters sustain the cost longer than the company can sustain the loss of revenue?
So it relies on a really dedicated minority.
Yes, often driven by what the models call strong environmentalists or activists, people with, statistically speaking, fat tails in their distribution.
Diet tails.
It just means there's a small group of people way out on the extreme end who care so intensely about the issue that they have a very low threshold for participating. They're willing to stick with the boycott for a really long time, even with the high personal cost, because the issue itself is paramount to them. They provide the endurance.
Got it. So economically, it looks pretty bleak for boycotts succeeding broadly.
Based purely on those rational choice models, yeah, the odds seem stacked against them.
But, and this is a big but, history tells a very different story, doesn't it? We've seen boycotts be incredibly powerful.
Oh, absolutely. When you shift from pure economic theory to historical reality, the picture changes dramatically. Sometimes boycotts have been devastatingly effective.
How? What makes the difference?
The key seems to be causing, as one source put it, massive and sustained disruption to ruling class interests. It's not just about slightly shifting market share, it's about inflicting real, unavoidable economic pain.
And the Civil Rights era is the prime example here.
Undeniably. The Montgomery bus boycott, starting in 1955, that's the textbook case. And it wasn't just a hashtag campaign.
No, it lasted. What was it?
Almost 13 months. 13 months of coordinated action.
That requires incredible commitment and sacrifice from the community. What was the specific economic impact?
It was huge. Black residents were about 3/4 of the bus ridership in Montgomery.
75%. Wow.
So when they stopped riding, the bus system hemorrhaged money. The estimates are around $3,000 a day in lost fares.
$3,000 a day back in the 1950s.
Exactly. That kind of sustained, crippling financial pressure couldn't be ignored. It was a major factor forcing the issue legally, leading up to the Browder v. Gale Supreme Court decision that declared segregation on buses unconstitutional.
And Montgomery wasn't alone. This tactic, hitting the economic interests of those in power, was used elsewhere too.
Definitely. Think about Birmingham in '63 or Greenwood, Mississippi. The boycotts there directly targeted white-owned businesses.
The idea being that if their businesses suffered enough,
They would pressure local officials to change segregationist policies. And it worked. In Greenwood, for instance, boycotts led to tangible changes in hiring practices for black workers by 1964. The economic disruption forced political change.
so this history established the boycott not just as an economic tool, but a political one. And the law eventually recognized that.
It did. The landmark Supreme Court case is NAACP v. Claiborne Hardware Company in 1982.
What did that case establish?
It explicitly confirmed that a political boycott, one aimed at achieving political, social, or economic change, is protected under the First Amendment.
So it's protected speech, like holding a sign or giving a speech.
Essentially, yes. It covers freedom of speech, assembly, and the right to petition the government. The court made a really important distinction.
Between political boycotts and what?
Yeah.
Commercial ones.
Exactly. There was an earlier case, the Nowhere case, where the court had looked skeptically at businesses using collective action basically to harm competitors. Economic warfare, essentially.
But the NAACP boycott did harm those hardware stores financially. So what was the crucial difference for the court?
It was the purpose. The court said the Claiborne County boycotters weren't just trying to drive competitors out of business for profit. Their goal was to vindicate rights of equality and freedom.
Constitutional rights.
Yes. Because they were pursuing fundamental constitutional goals, their actions were seen as political expression, deserving of strong First Amendment protection, not just commercial maneuvering. That's a huge legal underpinning for boycotts today.
Okay, so we have the economic theory saying probably won't work, the history saying it definitely can work, and the law protecting it as political speech. Let's bring it to the present day. How effective are these big, often non-policy-driven boycotts we see now?
It's really a mixed bag. Success seems to depend on very different things than those massive, coordinated civil rights actions. We've got a couple of really good recent examples showing both ends of the spectrum.
Let's hear them. What's a recent success story?
Well, you can't really ignore the Bud Light situation after the Dylan Mulvaney ad partnership in 2023. That backlash had a clear, measurable impact.
Right, that was all over the news. What were the numbers?
Before it all happened, Bud Light was #1, the top-selling beer in the U.S., holding over 10% market share.
And after?
It dropped significantly, fell to the #3 spot, down to about 6.5% of dollar sales. Modelo Especial and Michelob Ultra overtook it. That's a direct hit to market dominance caused purely by consumer reaction.
A very clear cause and effect. So even a sort of cultural flashpoint can translate into real market shifts.
In that case, absolutely. But now, let's compare that to another high-profile effort, the 2020 Facebook ad boycott. Remember the Stop Hate for Profit campaign?
I do. Lots of big brands joined, pulled their advertising. Verizon, Ben & Jerry's, big names. Seemed like it would hurt Facebook.
You'd think so. It got tons of media attention. But the result, it did not negatively affect Facebook or Instagram's overall ad revenues.
Really? Despite all those major companies pulling out, how is that possible?
It boils down to Facebook's, well, its structure, its sheer scale.
Yep.
Those top 100 advertisers, the big names that made headlines by joining the boycott, they actually accounted for less than 20% of Facebook's total ad revenue at the time.
Less than a fifth. Where does the rest come from?
Millions of small and medium-sized businesses all around the world, the long tail of advertisers. So even if all the big fish pull out for a while, the ocean of smaller advertisers just keeps swimming. The platform is almost structurally immune to that kind of pressure from established brands.
That's quite sobering for activists targeting huge platforms like that.
It shows the limits. However, we are seeing renewed impact in a different area, boycotts related to geopolitical issues, specifically over corporate support for Israel recently.
What's the evidence there?
Some global companies are reporting actual accumulated financial losses. We're seeing stock price declines in the range of 10 to 15% that are being linked directly to these popular boycott campaigns.
10 to 15% is definitely enough to get noticed in the boardroom.
It's significant enough that for the first time, companies like Coca-Cola and Starbucks are explicitly mentioning the word boycott as a risk factor in their official annual reports to investors.
Wow. So it's moved from social media noise to a documented financial risk.
That's a major indicator. When it shows up in the financials like that, you know it's having a material impact.
Okay, let's go back to that core economic problem, the free rider issue.
Yeah.
If pure rational economics says don't bother, what actually does motivate people to join a boycott? What overcomes that inertia?
Yeah, the psychology is fascinating. Research suggests it's less about individual cost-benefit calculations and much more about social factors.
Like what?
An interesting experiment looking at a Canada-US trade dispute found a few key drivers. The strongest one, peer pressure.
Just knowing other people are doing it.
Exactly. Learning that many of your fellow citizens are already boycotting makes you much more likely to join in. It validates the effort and the sacrifice, makes it feel like a collective thing, not just you tilting at windmills.
That makes sense. It connects back to the solidarity seen in movements like Montgomery. What else?
Retaliation is another factor. If you find out that consumers in the other country or group are boycotting your country's products, you're more likely to want to boycott theirs back.
A sort of tit-for-tat mobilization.
Kind of. And finally, elite cues matter. Being encouraged or rallied by political leaders or prominent figures gives the boycott legitimacy and focus. It shows it's not always purely grassroots. Leadership plays a role in directing that energy.
It sounds like the social dynamics can override the individual economic disincentive.
They certainly can. And thinking about who participates today, the very nature of the boycott might be changing too. Historically, we think of it as a weapon of the weak against the strong, right?
Yeah, that's the classic image.
But maybe now, maybe it's becoming a weapon of the privileged against the powerful.
How do you mean?
Well, consider spending power. In the U.S., the top 10% of income earners account for roughly half of all consumer spending.
Wow.
And critically, these are the consumers who are most financially able to afford to boycott. Switching brands, paying a bit more, going without something for a while. It's not a major hardship for them compared to someone on a tight budget. They have the economic cushion to sustain it.
So the power to inflict economic pain might increasingly lie with wealthier consumers who can absorb the opportunity costs we talked about earlier.
It's a compelling argument, which also means activists need to think strategically about who they're trying to mobilize. And we also have to consider the flip side.
The counterattack.
The boycott. The effort to support a company that's being boycotted.
All right. You mentioned Chick-fil-A earlier.
That's the classic example. After facing a boycott, they had a counter-mobilization, an appreciation day, and reportedly had their highest single day of sales ever because supporters deliberately went out to buy from them.
So a boycott can actually backfire if it energizes the opposition more.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
It shows that choosing a target isn't just about who you want to pressure, but also about who might rally to their defense. It's a complex calculation.
So pulling all these threads together, the economics, the history, the law, the psychology, the modern examples, what's the final assessment? What role do boycotts play in our democracy today?
Well, they're clearly deeply embedded in the American democratic tradition. The sources suggest they're a really important counterweight, especially now with so much overlap between political and economic power.
A way for citizens to push back using their economic choices.
Exactly. It allows people to express dissent and demand accountability outside of just voting or lobbying. It turns everyday spending into a potential form of democratic voice.
Okay, so if you had to summarize the effectiveness.
It's highly variable. Definitely a low likelihood, high impact kind of event.
Meaning they probably won't work most of the time.
Based on the free rider problem and opportunity costs, yes, success seems unlikely on purely economic grounds.
Yeah.
But when they do manage to achieve that critical mass, that sustained, focused economic disruption targeting key interests like we saw in the Civil Rights movement, they can be incredibly powerful. Powerful enough to force major legal and policy changes.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, our listener. We've talked about the Supreme Court protecting the political boycott as free speech. We know consumer spending is massive, 68% of U.S. GDP?
A huge economic force.
And we heard that the top 10% of earners drive half that spending. and they can likely afford the cost of boycotting. So here's the question to really chew on. What specific, sustained change in your spending would it take to contribute to, say, a 1% drop in overall consumer spending? Think about it. Could you actually give up your favorite coffee, your go-to beer brand, your preferred online retailer, not just for a week, but for months, maybe even a year, like in Montgomery? What's the personal cost you'd be willing to pay to wield that democratic tool and try to force significant change? Something to consider. That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.